only going to be able to theorise about what it would be like running according connected fully to the soul properly. But the amount of knowledge the soul has about from 2,000 years of experience is very high. Does that make sense? And also the amount of abilities that it has that are self-contained abilities, not abilities that are gifted by God or gifted by Spirit, but abilities that are a part of the soul itself. The amount of abilities they have are also very high. So when people around who don't have faith see those abilities, now they may feel that what I'm speaking about is real. Whereas before, and for the most part, most people who hear going through that moment just think what I'm speaking about is a theory. They sort of see it as a concept rather than a reality. When you believe something's a reality, then you make an effort to change, right? Because it increases your faith. So the real problem that most people have now is that most people don't. You're off, I think. I'll just start.
Yep.
Yeah, so as I was saying, when your faith increases, your desire to make changes increases. Your faith is a driver for the future. So if your faith is not very strong, it causes you to sort of live a normal life and then occasionally flirt with principles of truth. But when your faith is very strong, you start saying, "Oh, I want the truth to be my whole purpose in life." And so that substantially changes the direction of your entire life. And this is the issue that most people face who are listening to the right truth. At the moment, the faith isn't very strong. Not strong enough for them to even change hardly anything in their personal life at all. But when your faith becomes strong, then you want to make changes in your personal life constantly, because you want to constantly grow. After a while, you start seeing stagnation not as a comfort, but as a terrible disservice to oneself, And so after a while, you decide, I want growth more than anything else, and to have growth, I need truth. And so you start seeking for the truth that before you were just content to let it come to you, and without you doing much about. And so this is what we find when we're sharing truth with others, is that the majority of people who hear God's truth don't have hardly any faith about it at all, any faith in this reality at all. And that lack of faith means that everybody's very slow doing something about it. Make sense? But when you're not lacking in faith, your faith improves and increases, now you have a strong desire to seek truth, and also a strong desire to put it into action or practice in your personal day-to-day life. And if one of the 14 becomes at one with our soul while we're on earth, and you see it, that's going to increase your faith potentially, substantially, and therefore increase your drive for truth for yourself. Right? But if all the 14 don't do that, nobody does that, then your faith is going to be primarily determined by your choice and decision, and not by what's happened from something you've observed. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's why, if one of the 14 becomes at one with their soul, the strength of that conviction inside of people who are listening now will multiply, because now instead of just thinking, oh, maybe it's a possibility but I don't really know, they're going, there's the possibility, it's right there in my face. Now I know. And what am I going to do about that now? Make sense? Yeah. So, we've known that for a long time, and that's why Mary and I need to be more focused on our own progression than we are currently need to be sharing truth, because the more we progress, the more you have the ability to see something that demonstrates, that increases your faith in what we're sharing as truth. Yeah, you can do.
So, when you're traveling, how do you manage with? Do you still get as much time as you need to make changes?
No.
So how does that work?
Well, it's difficult, and that's why next time we do it, we need to allow more time that we can progress ourselves. I have progressed on the trip, and I dealt with some major things in Belgium which have improved my personal condition substantially. And Mary's also progressed on the trip as well. But we need time to actually do the emotional work, which is something that we've only had on occasion. So we had a bit of opportunity in Canada to do with some emotional work, a bit of opportunity in Belgium when we first arrived. Well, yeah, in between a lot of talks though. Yeah. So we had a bit of opportunity, because we were in North Carolina for 2 weeks, we had like 4 days in between, and on 1 or 2, we had a lot to do with all the bags not coming and all that stuff, all these technical things, but we did get a day or 2 where we could process some things. But for us, that's like, normally at home we'd be processing for 4 or 5 days a week, not sort of 2, 1. So travelling for us does slow down our progression. So we've got to balance our own progression with travelling and sharing truth with others.
Does that mean you're also suppressing your
microphone?
Sorry. Does that mean that during the time that you're not getting to progress, you would automatically suppress?
No, well, the more progress you become, the less you suppress. But it just means that if something big comes up, you don't have the time to address it in the manner that it's going to need to be addressed. And for me, that means that I'm going to have to address some of those things when I get home. And that's not ideal. The best time to address something is when it's happening, rather than afterwards. So that's why in the future we're thinking we need a bit more time. If we're doing travelling, we need a good solid 2 weeks to ourselves every month, where we can address the things that come up in the week or 2 that we're spending with people.
Along the lines of that emotional processing, but can I ask a couple of questions about this before you?
I don't want to go off of this subject. So,
okay,
so we were just having a chat, waiting for everybody to come, and I don't want to let this subject now, take a life of its own. I wonder, there are spirits who are waiting to talk with us, and we would like to talk with them.
Okay, so the only question I had was about God.
Yeah.
You said the beliefs about our concepts and beliefs about God would be the last injuries that we would heal,
Yep.
or the last sins we would heal,
Yep.
before we moved into equine mind state.
Correct.
So this may be a spirit-directed question, but so if you have a 6th-year spirit who has not believed in God and obviously has had many opportunities to address that, I assume, just like anybody else has.
Correct.
That each and every time that they refuse to go down that route, would their sin on that issue continue to build? Is that something that would?
No, because remember, the sin is the emotion within that causes you to make the decision. So the emotion within hasn't changed. They're just continually rejecting the concept of a universal father or mother. And as a result of rejecting that concept, every time they're offered an opportunity, which God does many times, of course, then they are not sinning again, they're just continuing the same sin. Yep. Make sense? So a lot of spirits worry about this, of course. They worry that if they've continually rejected the concept of God before, does that mean God's sort of keeping account of how many times they've rejected Him? And in the process of keeping account, does that mean the list got very long? Like where they had a very long list now, and that's not how it is. The sin is the emotional condition that creates the action. So the emotional condition that creates the desire to avoid the concept of a personal, singular God is there's a number of emotional things in particular that guide that particular action, and that those things generally, every time you rejected the concept, you just acted in that one feeling every single time. That makes sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. And along the lines of the discussion we were having at lunch, I thought I'd ask this question too, because one of the things I've heard you speak of, which I think, I wanted to hear again from you, was the issue of how much more efficient it is to address the issues of God first versus trying to do this in a self-reliant manner. And maybe you could talk about the timing difference between one versus the other way, where,
Yeah, it's difficult because most people don't understand the power of addressing your issues with God first. And so when you meet a person at where they're at, most of the time, most people on earth, when they're just in the process of trying to discover the truth, right from the beginning, they're usually very selfish. They're self-absorbed. So they're just looking at it from the point of view of, how can I improve my own life? How can I make my own life better? How can I become more happy? How can my relationship become more happy? How can I sort it out with my work and my job, the things that make me unhappy? The reason why they think this way is because they do not understand that if they sort out the God issues first, it draws happiness into every aspect of your life, right? The average person doesn't get that. So when you start talking about God with a person who's self-absorbed, most of the time they're not even hearing anything you say at all. Like it's like the extent of the power of the discussion goes right over their head, you could say, and because the average person is going, that doesn't apply to me, that doesn't apply to me, that doesn't apply to me. I just want to know how to be happy with Mary. So why are you bringing God into it? I just want to know how to be happy in my job. Why are you bringing God into it? And they don't understand the power of sorting out the beliefs about God and then how that trickles down into every aspect of your life. So what they do instead is they say, when you start talking to most people, they just go, why is he talking about that for? Like that was not what I asked about. That's not what I wanted to know about. And so in that place, we're basically going, that doesn't apply to what I've asked. And there's this underlying presumption that it doesn't apply. Now, the problem with these presumptions is you've got to somehow, when you're teaching, overcome them. Because if you don't overcome them, then they're not going to be ready for the real discussion that you really need to have, right? So the real discussion that we really need to have with many of you is based on spiritual principles. But many of you are not ready for that discussion yet. You're very bound in your emotions, very bound in your physical life, very bound in what makes you unhappy, and for the most part don't see how much of your unhappiness is related to sin. Substantially, many of you believe your unhappiness is related to the fact that your addiction is not being met by somebody else, and that's why you're unhappy. And so, unless you can, at some point, a teacher will need to deconstruct that before they can build on the foundation of what is really important to discuss. The difference between you as an audience and the spirits who want to talk to us is that they've already gone through all of that process. They've already worked out, actually, I've sort of worked out my life a bit, and I've worked out, my sin a bit, and I've worked on these things, and I realise it's important, and I've grasped the importance of it because it's affected my life in the spirit world so much. So they've actually gone through some internal resolution that the majority of people on earth have not done. Now, because of that, when we do have a discussion with them, they often can react to that discussion quite quickly because they've dealt with so many things already that the average person on earth doesn't even think is important to deal with. Yeah? And for many of these spirits, they start to realise my beliefs matter so much because my beliefs are what have kept me in this stagnant condition for such a long time. And so many of the spirits then go, they're already in the state where they realise how much their beliefs matter. And so when you start presenting to them how their beliefs are flawed in one way of love or another, they are much more open to having that conversation than most people on earth are. Most people on earth just want to hear what they're, how they're going to get their next meal and their next purchase and their next nice car and nice house in the Western world in particular, and their next enjoyable sexual encounter and so forth. And they don't understand that their relationship with God would change all of those things. They sort of feel their relationship with God is independent of those things. Whereas many of the spirits who come to talk with us know that that's not true. They're not independent discussions. Make sense? And so they are much more open to having an honest discussion about what the truth actually is on those subjects.
And then the last thing I was going to ask is the fact that, both of you are obviously older, several thousands of years older than, most of us here on Earth.
Yeah.
So when I first heard you speak, I think it was a 2008 recording where you read off your journal about your feelings about God as your mother.
Yeah.
I was blown away. I mean, and I can't find it again. I don't know why, but obviously it's a law of attraction thing. I keep trying to say, where is that recording? And I can't find it. Yeah. Where you wrote pages and pages and pages about God as your mother, how much you yearned for her and how much you felt let down. Yeah. And I've watched Mary in the videos as well very closely. Yeah. And I think
often judgmentally. You're gone.
No, not judgmentally. No.
Yes.
No.
You even did it yesterday.
If you feel that, then I'm sorry. That's something that you didn't, because it was not judgmental.
No, it was. But go on.
But when I watched her also, I felt, wow, I mean, it's so beautiful to see the depth of your soul. And I wonder if that's part of the maturity that comes, that you are really reincarnated versus people like us.
We're not reincarnated, but go on.
I mean, you're born again.
There's no such thing as reincarnation.
Whatever the semantics are, you know what I mean? You're an older soul. And so I am blown away by the depth of your feelings, because your feelings, the intensity of expression is so beautiful, and I find a little bit of shift in myself in the time, and I see that same thing happening. Yeah. So is that why we struggle so much more? Is my question,
obviously what God's trying to do, as a part of receiving God's love, your soul will expand. That means that your capacity to experience emotion will expand, and your capacity to understand your emotion at an emotional level will expand. It goes beyond what a person can do even in the sixth sphere, because it continues to expand. So as you receive God's love, your soul will change. Your soul's capacity to experience changes. So that includes all your capacity to experience sexual feelings, emotional feelings, and spiritual feelings, all intensify. The average person on earth has very dull senses. And when I say dull senses, they have dull physical senses, but they also have very dull emotional sexual and spiritual senses. And in fact, as we've talked about on this trip, the average person with regard to their spiritual and emotional senses, they're almost dead. They're almost shriveled up and gone. That's how severe the problem is. As you receive God's love, that changes. And so what happens is you have higher capacity to experience emotion. You can handle larger emotions. That also means you have the capacity to handle larger amounts of joy, but it also means you have the capacity to handle larger amounts of sadness, and so forth as well. And so all of the 14 experience extreme amounts of all sorts of emotions, whether they're happy or sad emotions. And that's a part of the development of the actual soul. The physical soul has expanded in its capacity to experience. When you're in your infancy, which all of you are, So, and I don't mean that in a put down, it's a fact of life that even if you're 100 years old, you're still an infant when it comes to the expansion of your capacity to feel. And particularly if you've not, in that 100 years, received much love from God, your capacity to emotionally experience things is very, very limited. Even a child just born has a higher capacity than the majority of you currently have to feel. So when you said, oh, I wasn't judgmental yesterday, yes, you were. I can feel when you were. I know exactly every moment you are. But that's only that I only have that capacity because I've grown in my capacity to feel not only my own emotion, but also yours. Make sense? And this is part of the benefits of feeling, is that you not only feel your own feelings more, but you feel everybody else's feelings more too, and you're able to even get to the state where the capacity to feel grows, but also the quality of the feelings grow. In other words, you're able to detect the nuances between, say, pride and arrogance and condescension and ridicule and abuse. And you're able to see the differences between all of those attitudes coming out of a person. Whereas the average person on earth, when you're in a state of very numb emotionally, you're just listening to the words and you're putting the words with your own thoughts, and what you hear goes in the ear and you go, oh, that means the person was angry, or that means the person was sad. Now with anger, most of you are used to that, but when it comes to nuances of other emotions like condescension, most of you are completely clueless of how much condescension you're dishing out to almost everyone around you at any time, and frequently with us, right? And so because of that desensitized state, there's not much sensitivity to what's really going on. Now, as you receive more of God's love, your sensitivity to what's going on will grow. It means you become more conscious of everything. So what we point out to you as a major problem, at the moment you'll see it as a tiny little thing. But down the track, as you grow emotionally, you'll see we were right, it was a major problem. Right? And the reason why you'll see that is because as you receive God's love will expand your soul and its capacity to feel, and therefore it's also its capacity to be sensitive. So there's a lovely scripture in the Bible that says, your heart of stone will turn into a heart of flesh, something that's more sensitive, right? And that's what becoming a one with God does. That's what the new birth is all about. You being born again into a place of sensitivity, and beyond what the child was even sensitive, beyond that. So I can feel things now more than what a child can feel them in any circumstance or situation. The difference too is that now I'm that sensitive, but I'm also able to determine what the emotion is and how it's coming and why it's coming and what the history of the person is and what experience they had as to cause them that emotion and all those things, which the child is not able to determine because it doesn't have that experience. So the child is just feeling the barrage without the awareness. Whereas a person who's become at one with God feels the barrage, the awareness, the history, what you would call the record of your life, and that's all felt as well. And for most of us that are detuned completely, we know nothing about ourselves. And a person who has progressed to become one with God knows far more about you than you know about yourself. Now, most of you at the moment don't trust that. So when we say something to you, you go, oh, no, that's not right. Oh, no, that's not right. No, that's not right. Just as you did just earlier. And it's hard to get across to you that we know what we're saying is right. And it's hard for you to even grasp that we would know better than you do. It's even hard for you to grasp that. And we get that because we've had 2,000 years of experience of sharing truth, and we've also met many millions of people in that process who've all gone through the same things that you will go through in this process if you choose to make it your own. What's that thought? I just had that thought about it in the movie. Like, if you choose to take it, should you choose to
Matrix?
Is it mission? Should you choose to accept it, this is your mission. That kind of thing. And so, you know, the average person on earth is not aware of how much they're not aware of. You know, it's a state of desensitized emotional state that exists in most people. And it's interesting when you're trying to share truth with them, particularly for us, because we've had so much experience with people over the centuries. And it's every single person goes, like you have not yet come to terms as an audience, or most people who listen to us haven't come to terms as an audience, what it means that when we say we've lived 2,000 years. You haven't even come to terms with that yet. So it's sort of like, you don't know what we know. You've got no idea what we know about you, even. And you have no idea how we know it either. And because the emotional sensitivity doesn't exist yet inside of you. Now, if you receive God's love, it will happen. And you'll get to the stage in your future where you'll be so sensitive to everyone around you, to yourself, to your own feelings, to God's feelings, to God's truth about, you know, how God feels about everything. You'll be sensitive to all of that as well. And it's beautiful to be in that state. But it's also interesting when you're on earth in that state, because everyone around you is just thinking you're still normal. You know, sort of. Not that everyone thinks I'm so normal, but, you know, most people think I'm a nutcase. But they think, oh, you're just a normal nutcase, rather than like that what you're actually saying is true, and that you can actually feel what people feel and sense what is going on in them, as a part of the growth that you've experienced yourself. So these are the advantages of having a relationship with God. But most of you will not understand them until you experience them. Make that sense? And that's what we're encouraging you to do, is to go through the experience. Stop trying to question the possibility of the experience, and stop trying to, you know, live a normal life on earth, which generally ends up with a lot of sadness at the end of it. And instead embrace God's truth and see where it takes you. Right? But also be open to the fact that the people who teach you God's truth know far more than you can imagine about you and also about the universe in which you live. They just haven't had the opportunity to share it with you yet. Yep. Make sense?
Yeah. Right.
All right, well, let's, I think, time to have a chat with some spirits up here. Okay. So what's going to happen here is some of the spirits who have different beliefs have wanted to talk with us. So we'll just chat with them and see where the discussion goes.
Hello.
G'day, how are you?
What did you say earlier? Discombobulated.
Yeah. You've been listening a while, if you heard that word.
Yeah.
That was yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah. We've been here all weekend.
Yeah.
But we feel that what you spoke about today was the thing that upset us the most, or agitated us the most.
Yeah.
And so,
do you mind me asking what your names are?
Sure. I've been appointed as the spokesman for actually a lot of quite a varied group of individuals.
Yep.
And some of us have just met here.
Yep.
So it's quite a responsibility I'm feeling at the moment.
Sure.
My name is Henri.
Henri?
Yeah. I lived in the United States. I was an immigrant to the United States some 200 years ago.
Yep.
And basically I haven't felt much changes since I passed.
Yep.
But there's like 200,000 people here who I think we all have very similar questions.
Yep.
But I've also been I'm going to make myself available to be the spokesperson for particular questions, or I can hand over to somebody else, but.
Well, let's focus on the questions that you're primarily interested in personally, because I'm sure that will answer many of the others who have the same questions. And then if there's any that you're not personally really that interested in, then hand it over to the people that are more concerned about those matters. Yeah.
Okay, so I came to this country as a Christian minister.
Yep.
And I was
From
involved
France.
And I was involved in what he would call missionary work here.
Yes.
I was involved with native people here.
Yeah.
And also in my later years, I lived in a community of people, mainly white people, and preached.
The days of the Wild West.
Well, yeah, we didn't call it that, of course, but I suppose it was.
Yeah.
But I considered myself a preacher.
Yeah.
And I considered myself to have lived quite a
Moral.
good life, yeah. Yeah. And well, now I'm questioning a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I'm questioning really a lot of things about existence and God.
Yeah.
Now that I've heard you speaking.
Yeah.
And I'm also questioning where I am. I don't know where I am.
Yeah.
A lot of us feel this way.
So you arrived in the spirit world and you sort of felt that that was now where you were at, and there was no opportunity to change from that location. Is that what you believed?
Yeah, and some more than others here have felt like that.
Yeah.
I would say and this is maybe I'll just explain a bit more about myself and
Sure.
then,
Sure.
So really I've been appointed the spokesman because I'm the most willing to speak.
Because everyone else is a bit more upset than you are.
Yes.
Yeah, gotcha.
But I think that I considered myself an ongoing missionary, really. I don't think that I've actually entered the spirit life.
Okay.
I think that I have been still
doing your missionary work on it.
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Trying to influence different people. You know your past, but
Yes.
you've been trying to influence different people towards Christianity. Is that?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. And I suppose I know I have a home in the spirit world, but I haven't really lived there yet.
Yeah.
Because I've been doing what I thought was God's work.
Yeah.
Ongoing.
Yeah.
And now I feel very concerned that perhaps that wasn't wise, and perhaps what I suppose my main concern is that what I've been teaching people and influencing people towards is not true.
Yeah.
That's my concern. I feel like I understand sin, but what you're saying is that, well, for example, that God, that Jesus didn't die for sins, and that God is much less directly involved in the direction of people's life than I had considered.
Well, I'm not really saying that God's much less involved in the direction of your life. God's trying to help every one of her children to come to more understanding about life. And God is very personally involved in that process. So I wouldn't say that God's not personally involved so much, but there are laws and there are principles that govern God's involvement. There's probably more to it.
I suppose I felt like I was divinely inspired to
Yes.
do what I did on earth.
As a sort of a calling,
Yes.
you would call it. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
And I do feel still that I'm an instrument of God in what I'm doing.
Yes.
Or I have felt that. Now I feel very
Worried. Because if your teachings are not in harmony with God's truth, then can you see you can't have been an instrument of God under those circumstances?
Well, that's where I'm having problems. I can't see that. And what have I been doing if I haven't been doing God's work?
Well, you've fixated on a set of beliefs, but perhaps let's talk about what you've done, and then perhaps it's better though to talk about what are the truths, and how to find out those truths directly from God. And then we can start looking at, well, what caused you to choose to do things the way you've done them, rather than sort of being more connected with what are God's truths. So,
Well, and also what?
So at the moment,
Why do I feel worried? I don't know.
Well, usually worry begins because we have some conscious things going on internally that we're worried about resolving. And once we start becoming aware, the first point of awareness after denial, the first point of awareness is we start to be concerned about what we don't know. Does that make sense to you? That's the first port of call generally. So, and during the place where you're worried about what you don't know, that's the time when you have the most fear about things, because you don't know what you don't know, and you feel like you should know that you don't, and so this causes a place of fear to develop inside of the person. And this is the same whether they were on earth or in the spirit world. So once a person says a truth or says what sort of resonates with you and goes, oh, what if that is true? That kind of feeling, which is, so if you think about most of the things I've talked about this weekend, that you've been listening to, you go, but what if that is a truth? I don't know if I really believed that before, but what if it is true?
Yeah.
Now I'm going to start firstly getting worried about what does it mean if it is true? Like what's going to happen then if it is true? And this is where we start to be concerned, you see. Yeah. So this is why you feel worried. And the key is to just see it as a part of a growing process in understanding what truth is. That makes sense? Like to still continue to seek for the truth. Yeah. So let's look at what the truth is, how to find it out. God is personally interested in you knowing the truth. But God's not going to share that truth unless you request for it, unless you ask for it. Remember the Bible itself even says that, doesn't it? Keep on seeking, keep on knocking, and these things will be open to you. So if you think about that as a principle, you can see that if I seek for truth, then truth can come to me. And the reason why it's like that, the law works like this, because when you don't seek for truth, your heart is not open to receiving it. So in a way, you could say what's been happening before you came to our seminar, what's been happening is that you haven't been seeking because you've been convinced that what you're doing is already right. So that causes you to not then seek to find out whether it is right or not. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So logically what happens then is because we're not seeking anymore, no more truth can now come to us, and now we're stuck with what we think we know. Right? But unfortunately for most people, there's no real validation about whether that is true or not. And certainly no validation from God, because most people don't understand how to get validation from God about whether something is true or not.
I thought that I was doing God's will, though, in my life.
Yes.
I had an experience when I was 19.
So describe the experience.
Well, I was working in like a foundry, and one day walking home from work, I felt like God
came to you.
Yes, and said I should go to the Americas. I should do this work.
Go preaching. So it's sort of like a major life-changing experience, wasn't it, for you on Earth?
Yes.
Yeah, it caused you to change the entire direction of your life.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, how that happened was a spirit came to you and told you that's what you should do. And what I'd like to do is introduce you to the spirit who said that to you, that you interpreted at the time to be God. So you've met him now, and he's sorry, isn't he, for what he's said to you now. He's progressed enough to himself to see that he's done the wrong thing with you. Now, the question then becomes, so this was a spirit, not God, telling you that this was the best thing to do, because substantially, he wanted you to do it. He felt you should do it.
Yeah, it was my
Great grandfather. Yeah.
He says he never said he was God.
No. But what caused you to believe he was?
Well, I felt what I felt was love. I felt love. I felt care. I felt definite command.
Yes.
And I felt.
Which is true. He did give you the command, didn't he? Yes.
Yeah.
But you felt the love and the care from the Spirit. Your great-grandfather, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. And you felt that for somebody to have that amount of love, it must be God. And you made that presumption.
Yeah, and I even had a vision of what it would be like.
Yes, which he gave you.
Yes.
Yes, because he could sort of see if you followed this path in the near future, this is what it would end up like. Yeah. So none of those things came from God, they came from great-grandfather.
Yeah, and it's good to meet him, but I feel very sad.
Yes. You know, it's,
He guided a lot of my life.
yes. So in that regard, you didn't have a lot of your own life, of your own choices and decisions. He was making choices and decisions for you.
I think I feel not that as much as that I didn't know God. I thought I knew God.
Yeah.
And I feel like through that relationship, I feel like he instilled values in me that I have, even till today, that have guided my life. So he didn't guide my life, but the values he put in me guided my life.
Well, some of
That's
those
why I
values
thought it
are
was
valid.
Righteous.
Yeah, some of those values are valid, but you presumed they were from God. All of the values were from God.
And I don't know if I can feel that any of it was righteous now.
Yeah.
I don't know that I don't have the certainty.
Yeah, because it came from a person. Yeah, I understand that. Well, the best thing to do to gain some certainty is to have that connection with God. Firstly through the conscience and then through this personal relationship. But
I feel quite anxious to do that now because I feel like what I've done is wrong now. It must be wrong.
well, one thing to bear in mind is that where you are right now is where the soul is designed, is where the Lord has put you. So what that means is that it can't get any worse than where you are right now. Makes sense? So you're worried that it might get worse, and partly you're worried because you're worried that God is a punishing God. But where you are right now is the direct result of the choices that have been made in the past. So it can't get worse than where you are right now.
I'm on earth though.
I understand that, yeah. And we can look at your home in the spirit world, but that has always been your home as well. It's not going to get any worse by you acknowledging more truths. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Yep. But acknowledging more truths does have the potential of making your life better. So it's worth doing for that reason.
Yeah, so I don't have a lot of trust anymore in
No.
anything.
No, and understandably so, because you believed it was God when you've now found out it was great-great-grandpa who gave you those leadings and those messages and all of the feelings that you got. And so you can see that what you thought was God is not God, but just a man, and just a man from your from your history, of the history of your family. And so naturally, I can understand why you would feel not just disappointed, but actually quite worried and concerned, and also quite upset that there was all of this misinterpretation.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to stay actually. I feel.
Well, can I suggest it's
came
in?
with one question and I got a completely different answer.
Yeah, but if you can stay in the conversation, we can help you through the process. Yeah? Because if you go away from the conversation, then the process will take longer. We can share a bit more truth with you, and that might help you through this process. Do you follow? Remember, it's the truth that's going to set you free with regard to things. So it's always good to say in the conversation where you're going to receive truth. But it's your problem.
Okay, just do it quick.
Well, I know you've got feelings to feel, and that's okay. So bear in mind firstly that having these feelings is okay to feel. But if we can just put them off for a sec while we have a conversation, and then you will need to go and feel some feelings after the conversation naturally. So that's okay. And this not only applies to you, but it also applies to all the others who are in the same boat as you. See, many of them who received the idea that it was a calling, can you see many of them had the spirits who now come to them and owned up to the fact that those people also had something influencing them into that calling, as you would call it. Yeah.
I just.
So you're not alone in this.
No, it just feels very bad, and I feel like every new thing you're going to say is going to feel worse. You say it's not, my location can't get worse, but my feelings feel worse since we started this conversation.
Yeah, but they've been in you anyway. They just need to come out. Right. So the bad feelings are there. They just need to come out. Bad feelings are always a consequence of past sin, and it's going to have to come out at some point. So you don't need to panic about it, but you do need to trust that you can go through it. Right? Make sense? Yeah. But I'm happy to stop if that's what you want me to do.
Well, please just tell me what I need to know.
Well, what firstly you need to know is how to listen to God rather than to other people.
Okay, how do I do that?
Well, you've got two mechanisms for doing that. One is the conscience. And all that requires is you having a sincere desire to know a truth and ask God for that truth. So let's apply it to some, what you would call Christian beliefs. So for example, Christian belief that Jesus died for your sins. Right?
Yeah, well, this is the issue. I feel like I was a man of good conscience, a man of conscience on earth.
Yes, but you were really a man of Bible-defined morals, which is different than being a man of good conscience. But we need to ask God whether it's different.
Yeah, so this is my worry.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I know what you said before, but I need to talk about it.
Yeah.
So my worry is that I feel I did ask. I feel I was in touch with my conscience. But now, hearing you speak, now I feel like this is what you're saying is more about the conscience, this uncomfortable feeling that I have.
Correct.
Now you're saying that's more an operation or a conscience thing.
Correct.
And now there's just so many questions about, well, what was I doing before?
I understand, but perhaps what we need to do first is
It's not like, so I know you're going to say ask for the truth, but I feel like it's not like, it's more like what has happened today is that you said something and then I can't trust my asking because I've always asked, but then I wasn't talking to God. You need to tell me things and then I will know based on my feelings. I think that's...
Well, this is one reason why what happened to you on earth. This is the emotion as to why you want a great-grandfather to give you what to do. Because before he did that, if you look at your life, you felt quite aimless. And you felt like you needed direction from someone else.
Yeah. Does
that make sense? So it's this exact emotion that now you want me to do for you, which is what you wanted from your grandpa. And this is why your great-great-grandfather popped in and did what he did.
But I don't want to ask, I can't ask God. I will know if you say, and then I have this same discomfort feeling that maybe I need to explore. But if I ask, then I run the risk of just communicating with somebody else that's
No.
not God.
No, you don't.
Well, I thought I was communicating with God.
No, you have a desire to be guided and directed by somebody, which God will not do. So while you believed you were communicating with God, you weren't.
I understand I wasn't.
Yeah. So what I need to do is show you what it feels like when God communicates with you. And the best way to do that is to actually have the experience of it.
Tell me what I have to do. I'm not saying I'm going to do it.
Okay. And can we just, with the laughter, guys, it's not, this is, our brother here is in distress.
Yes.
No need to laugh. Do you follow? That just makes it very hard for him to stay. Okay, so just got to stop that. Okay, so this is what we need to do. Let's look at one belief, and that is, does Jesus' blood save me from my sin? That one question. So what you need to do is open your heart to asking God whether that is true or not. Right? And it needs to be a sincere, emotional desire to ask, not because at the moment you're a bit more afraid. You're afraid of the answer. What I need you to do is just be able to accept the answer emotionally. You follow? So if you ask the question, does Jesus' blood save anyone from sin? You can do this.
I understand that the answer might be no. I know that. And I'm not even afraid of that. I'm just afraid of, I don't trust anything now.
I know, but if you have the feeling and you can feel God's response, then you may start trusting that. So what I'm suggesting is, let yourself have this feeling of mistrust, but go through the experience, because it's only by going through the experience that you come to know things. Does that make sense? See, at the moment you're trying to resist the experience because you want some reassurances, but what I'm saying is the reassurances will come with the experience.
But what about the other experiences that I've had that I built my life on?
Well, you'll be able to compare that experience with this new experience. And you'll be able to work out qualitatively the difference between the two experiences. Does that make sense? So there's one experience when you're seeking guidance from a person and you get an answer, even if that person is unseen, you've already had that experience, what that feels like. Now let's compare that experience with the experience of asking God what the truth is.
I honestly don't know if I believe in God now.
I understand.
I don't know if I can ask someone and I don't know who it is.
So say that to God. That's a sincere statement. Say that as a part of this experience. And I understand that you might feel, so cut up about the fact that you have these things that you believed sincerely and yet they've turned out to be false. I understand that. But let's at least have the experience so we can compare the two experiences. And so you can compare qualitatively the difference between the two experiences.
Yeah.
Make sense?
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just don't know if I want more experience. I feel like the experience I've had now is bad.
Well, the experience you've had up to now with great-great-grandpa is bad. There was a misrepresentation of it coming from God. But what I'd like for you to experience is what it feels like when something does come from God, so that you can compare the two experiences to work out the difference. And you know that makes logical sense, right?
So angry.
Yeah, I understand, but bear in mind that your anger is really about what great-great-grandpa has done.
I know.
Yeah.
So I don't know anything now.
Well, I would put to you that you haven't known anything for a long time, but this is the first time you're aware of it, which is different than... See, up until now you've believed you've known, which is not the same as knowing. There's a big difference between those two things. And Partly the arrogance built in the course of your life to cause you to believe you knew that and trust in that experience. Does that make sense? Rather than questioning it. And what I know the discussion is now causing difficulty for you because I'm questioning the experience, but what I'm suggesting is let's go through the alternate experience and see what that feels like, and then you can have some way or point of comparison.
Okay.
Yeah. And this applies to all of you, not just to you, Andre. Yeah. Okay. It's different, isn't it? Can you see it's not as forceful as what you got from your grandpa? Yeah. Can you see that? It's more in alignment with allowing you to make a decision. Can you see that too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you use conscience, this is what it's like. It's not forcing you into, I'm doing this, you have to do that, you have to go and do this life and live this life. And that's a very forceful thing to do with somebody else, right? But with God, God's just saying, this is the truth. Here it is. It's great that you wanted to know it.
It feels like something that enters the middle of me, not my head.
Correct. Yeah, you say it enters your heart, really good.
But it also feels like it shakes foundations
Of belief.
in me,
Yeah.
in me, not.
The emotional foundations in you shaking, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is different than having an intellectual concept of a thing. Yeah. Okay. So you've asked that question. The answer was, does Jesus' blood save from sin?
No.
No.
And this is really how we all came together because of this statement that you made.
Yes.
And now there's just so many questions about that from others here as well.
Yep.
About the how does that work then? Does Jesus even love us now? Is there even, like, how do you deal with sin then? What is sin then? What is the purpose of existence then? What is just so many questions about that.
Well, let's first address, does Jesus love you? Let's first ask whether Jesus is God, because that was another belief you had too. Let's ask that same source. No. So the answer to that is no too. Is Jesus a human only?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Can you see there's nuances to that one?
Yeah.
That's what it feels like, right? So was he born a human? Let's ask that question.
Yeah.
He was. But then something happened to him. Just ask that question. Did something happen to him to change him?
Yeah.
Yeah. Into something different than a human. Yeah. Okay. So where is Jesus?
Yeah. There's people come now to help us with this.
Yeah.
It's very confusing, and actually now I really want to leave. It's too much. We can't handle the shame.
Well, I don't feel there's a lot to be ashamed of, to be honest. And I know that you need to go through your shame and your feelings. That is something you certainly need to learn to do. But there's not a lot to be ashamed of. A lot of what's happened to you is a result of false teachings on earth. And people imbibing them year after year, century after century. And so this is the consequence of these false teachings on earth. They have long-term consequences well after you've passed. And this is something to bear in mind in the future for yourself when you're teaching other people too, that also has long-term consequences.
There's so many people that I've taught.
Yes, but it's been the same, you were taught too, weren't you? You've got to bear that in mind. Yeah. And this is something God has compassion for.
It's very confusing for all of us now.
Yeah.
Being told who you are, and there's a lot of worry, and I feel shame, they feel worried.
Yeah, but I don't feel there's any need to be. I love you.
It's too many things at once. We can't deal with this. What does it all mean? It's too many questions. I can't even convey all the questions that
Everyone's
everybody-
asking.
Yeah.
Well, you remember I said that once you start this process, a lot of panic sort of starts to set in. And this is what you're now experiencing, that feeling of panic. Do you follow me?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And so the key is just allowing yourself to experience the panic rather than act in it. So what I mean by that is, at the moment, you're so panicked that what does all this mean? I don't understand what's going on. And what that does is it busies up your ability to be able to understand what's happening. So you need to let yourself go through the feeling of panic, right? And if you need to, we can let you go, and then during the week, Mary and I can talk with you again.
Yeah.
And
I think we need to. It's too much.
yeah.
And I know there's other people here now who can help us.
Yes. Yeah. And you can see their condition is good because they feel lovely, don't they? They feel kind and compassionate. Yes. Yeah. So they'll be able to help you. But if there are any further questions, but I'm happy to answer them during the week, perhaps.
It's a lot of feeling unworthy about that and strange about that.
Yeah, but no need to be.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. I'll let you go there. Yeah. We love you though, and bear in mind that these spirits can help you with all of those questions. But the way they're going to need to help you is by you need to feel some of these feelings you have in order to accept the answers. Does that make sense to you? Because while you block up the feelings and lock them up, the answers won't. You'll hear the people talking, but they won't make any sense.
Yeah, yeah. That's how it feels right now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you. Anyway, we're just embarrassed. We've got to go.
No worries.
Yeah.
Okay, do you guys have any questions before we move on to another? And
I don't turn the lights on.
yeah, don't want them on and off. You just leave them on all the time.
Yes.
Thank you.
In this experience combined with what you were talking about earlier, it sounds like most people in the spirit world have no clue. Are they even aware that there are spheres and that there's a way to progress and that there's the possibility of progression?
A lot don't know. It's very. Well, you think about most of the Earth's population at the moment.
Are they as clueless as we are?
Well, you don't automatically get clued up as soon as you pass.
That's what you.
And this is something that many of you believe, that when you pass, that everything will become clear to you. No, the only thing that might become clear to you is that you passed. And even then, that's not necessarily a given, depending on your attractions and your influences.
And so is the way to progress to have this questioning mind?
Always. A childlike questioning mind. You think about the way, Stephen, a way a child questions. A child questions not coming from a position. The child is just like interested in every answer, like, why is the sky blue, Daddy? Why does the moon look bigger when it's on the horizon? It's asking, and Daddy could almost say anything and it will listen, but not necessarily agree, but it just listens. And it doesn't try to attack the opinion either, right? Many of you are doing that even in your questions. So many questions that adults ask are really statements.
Presupposing the answer.
Presupposing an answer. And that's not the same questioning, emotionally open questioning that God desires you to have. And that's why God doesn't answer questions where you're in that state pre-proposing answers. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh. And so then, it sounds like there are teachers and people like you
Yep.
and Mary over in the spheres who are willing to come and help.
Yes.
But we have to invite them and ask them to come.
Yes, well, I asked them to come, but, you know, so in the conversation, and, you know, we have multiple conversations going on, some of them are in my mind giving messages to spirits who I know will come and help this particular group, and this particular group needed some assistance from specific spirits who have gone through the same experience of being disappointed with Christian belief.
Yeah.
And so I asked those particular spirits to come,
But
but their openness to desire them coming was a large part of their ability to see them and then respond to them.
And so then we ask and then see who shows up. Or
Yeah, but it's not, again, it's not a ask from your mind. It's,
That's from
I
the heart.
want, you know, I want to know. In the case of them in the beginning, the reason why I asked was because they didn't want to ask. Their shame and their guilt about having taught some false beliefs was already building. And in the end, if I had let them to their own device before I'd asked those spirits to come, they wouldn't have probably moved from that shame.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because you can see I'm getting close to that.
Well,
And I want to know what to do when I get over there.
well, the childlike questioning state is not a state you're in, Stephen.
I know.
You know that, right? You've got some very formulated opinions.
I do.
And you're very sure about them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what causes you to not have that open state. So don't think that you're going to be able to manufacture that state.
How do I get there?
Well, there's going to have to be a heart change about truth, isn't there? Like in the sense of being open to the concept that Stephen doesn't know anything
Mm-hmm.
at all,
Yeah.
even,
Yeah.
and going from there and going, okay, if I was like a child wanting to understand a thing, you know, like say how something works, what kind of questions would I be asking then? And try to picture in your own feelings and thoughts what it would feel like to be like a child seeking the answer rather than an adult who already believes he knows the answer. Make sense? And then what you need to do is let yourself feel what that feels like so you can recognize within yourself that ability that all of us have. We all have this ability to enter this sort of childlike questioning state that's not critical, not judgmental, not, you know, already determine the answer or presupposing answers, but a state where they're open to receive and then evaluate. Like what if Stephen was in that place, what would he feel like? Now, some of the reasons why you're in the state you're currently in is because you, similar to these spirits, you want to believe you already know something because worth is attached to what you already know. Right? And one of the things you're going to have to address in your future, and this applies to pretty much everyone on earth, is you're going to have to address the attachment between the worth that you feel when you think you know something versus the worth you feel when you're told you don't know anything at all. Does that make sense? And from God's perspective, a child who knows nothing has worth. So you knowing something from God's perspective doesn't mean you're worth more. It means you're worth the same as you were when you knew nothing. Right? And there needs to be a disconnect between how you view your own worth and your desire to seek the truth.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Right.
How many spirits in the room with us right now?
Yeah, there's quite a few from there. Yeah, but mostly because of the subject matter that we've been discussing, which to them is more important than many of the other subjects we've been discussing so far. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Can I ask a personal question about beliefs?
Yes, we'll see whether I want to answer them.
So I went through a number of experiences over the last 6 years with divine truth.
Yep.
It took me to what I thought was a pretty bad place. I lost a lot of things, and it led to some dark times in my life.
Yep.
And I found that after I got away from all that, how do I word this? I kind of lost faith in the path, if you will.
Yep.
Because things got so hard, and I can't see where my beliefs are wrong, because obviously they are. And so, I don't know if I'm explaining it very well. There's a lot to say, but.
Yep. Let's firstly deal with some problems that we face on earth when we accept beliefs. When you accept a belief on earth, you have the momentum of your prior beliefs affecting everyone around you. So you are a person who's going, okay, there's a new truth that I'm accepting as truth, right? But the people around you are going, why are you accepting that for, you silly person? And the people around you will often then believe that in doing this new thing that you're doing, that then gives them reason to make your life more traumatic. Right?
Yeah.
So that gives you the feeling that embracing the truth has made your life more traumatic. But who is making your life more traumatic?
I'm pretty sure at one point it was a group of women spirits who were kind of bullying me.
Correct. So there's people who you were in addiction with before, who you were willing to be in addiction with before, and you didn't even know you were in addiction with before, who are now willing to make your life more difficult because you're now changing. And that feels like a degradation because you're going through emotions that you didn't go through before. Make sense so far?
I think so.
Yep. And the pressure around you, and it's not only going to be their pressure, but they will pressure people around you too, to try to force you back into the position you had before. And that does make your life more difficult. But you've got to see who's making it more difficult. It's not God, and it's not God's truth. It's people who want you to believe a lie that's making it more difficult. Right? Whether those people are spirits or people on earth, it's really immaterial. What matters is, why do they want to make it more difficult? What do they want from you? And what have you been prepared to give them in the past that causes you to still have this connection with them that allows them to influence you the way they do? Make sense?
Yeah.
Now that is a tough thing to go through, particularly on earth, because you've still got the spirit influence while it's happening. You've still got the pressure while it's happening. But if you can go through that and come out the other end of it, you're going to be one quite strong individual who is capable of determining the difference between spirits that actually have your interest at heart versus spirits who only want codependent addictions with you. You follow?
Yeah.
Now in this case, great-great-grandpa wanted codependent addiction with Omri. Right? The codependent addiction was great-great-grandpa believed that the Christian beliefs were true, and he feels that he failed on his earth life to encourage other people to believe those teachings. And so he found a great-great-grandson who was prepared to listen to him, and he gave him the feeling that this is what you should do. And he didn't really care at the time either that the great-great-grandson, interpreted those feelings as God's. He didn't even really care about that, even though he knew that. He didn't care about that. He just felt grateful that he could influence his great-great-grandson into doing the things that he feels he should have done when he was on earth. Right? Now, that kind of pressure is quite strong. Now in the case of Andre, he was willing to accept the pressure because he interpreted it as coming from God. Not understanding that God would never do such a thing. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. So for yourself, if you think about similar principles, you can see that the spirits who have brought this pressure to bear in your life, they have nothing to do with God. They have nothing to do with what is right. They want to maintain an addiction with you. So don't blame God's truth for it happening. See, in the past 6 years, you've had a tendency to blame God's truth for it happening, rather than seeing it as an addiction being broken down. You follow?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, most of us, when we're having an addiction broken down, we go, wow, this is tough. And it is tough. And particularly when you've got large amounts of spirits motivating you towards that addiction and pressuring you and punishing you when you don't imbibe it, that makes it tough. But none of that is happening because of God's truth. It's all happening because they want to maintain their lie. All right?
Yeah. It just feels like the more I try to do divine truth, the worse it gets.
Well, they're pressuring you to make you feel that way. But from God's perspective, you breaking down the addiction is a good thing. And from God's perspective, you will be free of it if you continue to break it down. What happens is you sort of there's all of this codependence that's going on between the two of you. And when one of you starts to progress, in other words, you start to raise your condition, and maybe I'll just draw this for you so you sort of understand it a bit better. When one of you starts to progress properly and decide you're going to break the addiction, which is what you decided basically 6 years ago, right? You're trying to break the addictions. So at the beginning, your soul and their soul is in complete agreement. You follow?
Yeah.
And then you want to progress. Can you see, if you get to this position, this new position, you'll be further away from them.
Yeah.
You follow? They don't want that. Because they've spent years getting you to do what they want. So they don't want that to happen. They don't want you further away. They want you closer. So they will let you deal with the emotions that make you closer, but they won't let you deal with the emotions that make you further away. Right? They're going to put pressure on you. So let's say you're here now and they're putting the pressure on. Trying to put pressure on. Now at some point, if you continue to progress, the connection between the two of you will be so weak from your addiction perspective that they'll have no influence at all. But during this time when there's all this pressure, that's when it feels the worst. And the average person who goes through that goes, this is bad.
It was so bad.
Yeah, they go, this is bad. I don't want to do this anymore. And that's exactly what they want. You understand?
Yeah.
You're doing then exactly what they wanted, which was going back into line, getting back into line, back under control, right? Whenever I receive spirit opposition, and in 1st century now, I've got mountains of it. You understand? The more opposition I get, the more determined I get to progress more. Because I know I'm only getting the opposition because I'm breaking down the problems. Right? So the key is to look at it this way. The way I look at it is, the more opposition I get, the better it means I'm getting. You know?
Yeah.
And then you get to a point where the cord between the two of you basically snaps. Like the joining, the addiction basically snaps and you don't even feel them anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. It got so bad to the point where I wanted to commit suicide. And I don't know, how do you get past that?
By feeling the feelings without acting upon them. And also, you remember the desire to commit suicide is driven by anger, which is actually the avoidance of the grief you feel. So what you need to let yourself go through is the grief of the attack. It's an attack.
I tried that.
Yeah.
I feel like I put every ounce of effort into doing a lot of the things that you say.
Well, this is what I'm saying. You got to forget the effort and surrender to the grief.
Mm.
So what you did was you tried harder, but that's not That's not what I do. What I do is I just surrender to the grief. I just let myself have it.
It's sort of the opposite of trying to feel strong. You got to let yourself.
You're trying to feel strong.
Feel weak and sad and attacked.
So that's what I let myself feel.
I guess I think that I tried doing what you're saying, is I tried to feel that attack, and it was like months. And
well, it's only months because you're avoiding.
Okay.
Can I give you another illustration?
Sure.
When we started this trip in Belgium, for 2 weeks before I was getting really seriously attacked. By the time we got to Belgium, I was quite ill with the attack. I didn't sleep for 7 days when we arrived in Belgium at all, for 7 days. And by the end of it, like I was crying about different things during those 7 days, but by the end of it, I just had this big cry, like where I stopped all of my resistance and I cried for 6 hours, right? And during that process, I let go of all of my openness to that attack. That makes sense? And I said to Mary, as soon as it was finished, I said, I'm going to get better now. I'll be, because we were worried that I'd just arrived and we had a talk 4 days later. There was a talk happening 4 days later, 3-day talk. And I was so worried that we were even looking at maybe counselling the talk and everything. Like, because in the state I was, I wouldn't be able to give one. And so, but once you surrender completely to the feeling and just go through the feeling without any resistance, that's when the healing occurs. The majority of people on earth don't want to do that though, because it feels out of control, psychologically scary. It feels very uncomfortable. Most people on earth want control, total control of their feelings. We're not prepared to feel that level of grief. You know, we have a controlled version. This is exactly what Andre was just experiencing now. He was not willing to feel that level of grief. That's why he wanted to leave. Does that make sense?
And I've experienced a lot of that in the last 6 years or so, perhaps in different aspects.
You were blaming God for it, God's truth for it. So that's not feeling. That's what that's doing is saying, look, I'm trying to do this new truth, this truth thing, and look at the terrible results I'm getting. It's all your fault. You withdrew from God in the process. Now you're on your own, right? And you are on your own when you do that, right? The reason why you withdrew from God was because you were blaming God, which is what these spirits wanted you to feel. Yeah. They want you to blame God for the experience you're now going through. Right?
Something that's very helpful when you're getting attacked, and you have to acknowledge the truth of what is happening. And so if you're in that process and it feels terrible and horrible, and you're like, God, you know, make it stop, or this is kind of your fault, then you're avoiding the truth of what's happening and what's coming to you from the person who's attacking you. So you can't really experience the grief of it because and the attacker doesn't want you to feel that it's coming from them or what's coming from them exactly. Yeah. But unless you like really seek the truth about what's happening, it gets a bit difficult to break through, because you can't actually, in any way to process the feeling, you have to be connected to God's truth about what's happening. And so
you're blaming God's truth for it happening, when actually the spirits were doing it to you, and it was their fault. But also your prior codependent addictions. You think about your relationship with your mother. What's that like?
Not great.
No, what does it look like? Be more direct, more straight. More descriptive.
Well, I don't feel particularly close to her, and she was pretty emotionally abusive. Yep.
And can you see, by avoiding the emotion with her, you attracted a group of women spirits who were the same. Oh. Now that's not something you dealt with in the last 6 years.
No.
No, you don't see that as the cause. That makes sense? You can see what I'm saying now though. It kind of just dropped, isn't it? Like, oh, these spirits, mum, same, and just because you get rid of mum out of your life because she's abusive, it doesn't mean you're getting rid of the spirits if you have a codependent problem. You got to deal with the feeling you have that causes the desire to have them in your life, which is really all about feeling like I want a mum that's nice. I want a mum that's going to nurse, look after me and care for me and love me. And that's about not grieving that you didn't have one. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that attraction then causes the spirits to come and they just treat you the same as your mum treated you. Right? And then when you try to break up with them, instead of blaming them or your relationship with your mum that hasn't yet been grieved, you're blaming the truth for it, God for it.
Mm.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
And that's why you had a tough time. Because in that process of blaming God for it, the truth is God's not to blame for that. And when you're blaming God for that, you're basically separating yourself from God. So now God can't help you through the process that you really need His help to go through this process with your mum. You follow? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what many of us then do is we make the wrong decision. The decision is, I'm either just going to give up or suicide. You're angry about having to deal with it, so suicide. Or we go, I'm just going to give up altogether and go back to my old life. That was easier. So we do that for a while. You've tried all of these, right?
Yes. That's where I've been the last year and a half or so.
Correct. You said that to me when we met, right? Just outside. And so this is the types of things we do in order to get comfort back. And these spirits, you think you've got a posse of women spirits around you, right? Oops. around you, you've got a posse of women spirits around you. They know that they just put pressure on you, just like your mum used to. And instead, as long as you don't grieve your relationship with your mum, but do anything else, they have control of you. Right? And you've been unwilling to grieve the relationship with your mum.
It's strange to me because I feel like I've grieved aspects of my relationship with my mom. And
But not
healed
what you want.
Mm.
You haven't let go of what you want.
Mm.
You understand what I mean by that?
Like the addiction.
You want a mum who loves you and cares about you, which is the addiction. And the addiction, while it remains, is going to drive your behaviour and their attraction to you. As soon as you get rid of that, you break the bond. Your life will change. You'll no longer have all this pressure from these women spirits. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Part of your anger was that you were under the influence of these women. You started to shift.
And they made it hard.
They made your life harder. But the anger is with your mum. Mum, why weren't you a loving mum?
Yeah, why were you abusive?
And so then when you try to shift and they start attacking you, just like mum did, there's an anger about having to deal with a woman's attack, basically.
Yeah.
And the anger about having to deal with a woman's attack is what drives a suicidal feeling. You're like, I don't want to die rather than feel about grieve a woman's attack.
Yes. So it's really that you would rather die than cry.
I guess so, even though I've done a lot of crying.
About a woman's attack.
About the woman's attack.
Mum, let's say it, mum.
Yeah.
You don't want to cry about that, is what I'm saying. You cried about being attacked.
Cried in a lot of its anger.
I did that for the first 7 days in Melbourne.
Yeah. And a lot
Cried
of
about being attacked.
if you're honest and you pray about it, you'll feel a lot of your crying was anger about being attacked, not grief about being attacked. Do you feel the distinction?
Absolutely, yeah. And I've experienced the difference between what you're saying.
Yeah. Now, I think we've said enough about it.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense?
Thank you so much.
Okay, where are we next? Cool.
So thank you for that channeling, because I felt like I got a lot from that. I grew up Christian, and I've been having a headache this whole past couple of days, and now it's like almost gone.
Yeah.
After that.
Yeah, so I've been known, you can listen to Divine Truth for 10 years
It's
and
been
still
13,
have the same group of spirits pressuring you the entire time.
I've been, what is this? I have no idea, and I can't believe it's gone now because it's just been really severe.
Yeah.
So, and I'm open to feedback about that. My specific question as well, that you kind of maybe just answered, but you were saying at the end that he needed to go off and feel some emotions before he was going to be able to hear more.
Yeah.
It's not too personal on Andre's part. I'm curious what those feelings are, like what was precluding
Yeah,
it.
Well,
so Steve,
can you sort of imagine what they might be? Just for, it'll help you if you
Yeah,
imagine what
I mean, I identified a lot with his feelings around not feeling like you can trust God and
being told an untruth and then believing it completely for a long period of time, and then somebody come along and telling you that was completely wrong. And you built your entire life on it. In Andre's case, he became a missionary because of it.
Yeah.
He built his entire life. As far as I can understand, he didn't even have a wife or anything. And he feels he's missed out on a lot of his life. Yeah.
Yeah, and also feeling like he doesn't want to ask God directly.
Well, again, it's for a similar reason,
Yeah.
you know, in the sense that we often blame God for things people did. It's easier to blame somebody, God, than it is to blame the people who did it, oftentimes.
yeah, and also his feeling was, well, how will I know that this is God?
That one, yeah, I
Yeah.
can relate to that one too.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been tricked, and now how will I know this isn't another trick?
Yeah.
Initial.
But when we compare the experience,
Yeah.
Yeah.
he could see, this stuff coming from God is very soft inclination as to what is right and wrong, and no more. There was nothing from God saying you've got to do something about it. Nothing from God saying you've got to live your life this way anymore. Nothing from God saying any of that.
He felt more distressed because
It was so gentle.
but also because it hit him in a place where he knew he needed to make a different decision. He wasn't going to be directed anymore.
Yeah.
But he started to feel like feelings about his own morality. That's why he was so distressed. Is he felt like he felt I've done
taught all
something
these
wrong.
people.
And so even though God's answer was gentle, he felt a lot about it, rather than he had preferred a life where someone told him what to do and he didn't have to have an inner
Questioning
or
motive.
worry or
Look at his own motive.
a process of coming to terms with, is this the right thing to do, and what if I make a mistake?
Yes.
And can I clarify, are you saying I have had Christian spirits around?
Well, you think about your history.
Yeah.
You were born a
Christian.
Christian, which type? Methodist. Alright. What do they believe?
Well, the church I went to had some different beliefs than my personal parents did. They were much more, my personal parents were much more intense. And it
Okay,
was
so
like
they were very strict.
Fire and brimstone.
What fire and brimstone
Providence
Methodist.
and
Yeah. So very much
Punish
about
and-
heaven versus hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you make a mistake, that's it forever.
Punishment.
I still get triggered by you guys using the words
Versus-
repentance and
versus
consequence
reward.
and yeah.
Yeah. So heaven versus hell, punishment versus reward. All this sort of feeling of how God's so angry about everything.
Yeah. Especially if you do anything wrong.
Especially if you're doing anything wrong, yeah. And when you do something right, well, you should have damn well done it in the first place. Type of feeling. This is the general Methodist feeling, right? Yeah, so there are some flavours of Christianity that have more tolerant views, and then there's some more fundamentalist flavours of Christianity that have less tolerant views, more like, you're doing this or else type of views. And so, of course, that's going to have an impact upon your interpretation of what God's nature is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do know that.
Yeah. And this has greatly affected your life, much more than you have understood.
Yeah.
See, when we first met you, you were more interested in personal progression, your health. Can we turn off the phones, thank you? And more interested in personal progression, health, and your personal welfare, relationships, but not understanding how these concepts of God have actually dictated to you so many things that have affected all of those things.
Well, I left the Christian thing and did the New Age thing.
Of course, so you left that and went to New Age, yes. Why New Age? What's New Age
I don't know if
beliefs?
I totally know why.
Well, New Age is quite
Well, I didn't think there was
obvious.
punishment, so that felt like a relief.
What's the New Age belief?
No punishment.
No punishment, you
Yeah,
can do no wrong. There's no wrong.
Yeah.
It's all just your opinion, my opinion, anybody's opinion, yeah?
It's all
So
relative.
it's the flip side, isn't it, of this on that? What else? What about God? Good God? New
I
Age?
mean, I never fully gave up the idea of God, but it was more like, universe and
Yeah.
no personal relationship.
The benign
Yes.
universe.
No personal relationship.
Is God, right? Okay. In other words, it's not there to punish me or guide me or anything else, nor is it there to cause me trouble. You know, it's just benign, it's just there. We just accept we're here, they're there, it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah, what else? God's an energy,
Yeah.
not a personality, so God doesn't have opinions.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that meditation was the sort of ultimate spiritual practice for a number of years.
Yeah, what is meditation really?
Emotional suppression.
Well, what is it? It's
Calming down.
Stillness and breathing.
It's calming down your terrors. What is this? It's a way of calming down your terrors. So it's terror management. Okay, so here, this was terrifying. This is now terror management. This was like God who's angry and upset with me. This is like, oh, benign, just energy. This was, you do the right thing or else. This is, there's no wrong or right. You can pretty much do anything you want. So you can see why you went.
Reincarnation consequence, maybe, but.
Oh, maybe. That's all the future.
Right.
Right now. It's like this whole view of reincarnation is really about how can I delay my sin to the future consequence? You know, that's really what it is. And so the whole concept is I'm going to get out of having a consequence right now.
Yeah, I wasn't terrified.
That's right, because why be terrified? The consequence is way down the track there somewhere, and I've got another chance back here anyway. So,
Sorry.
go on.
I know, just personally for you courts, if you think about it, in that New Age phase, you actually attracted a bunch of spirits who were like, honey, do whatever you want, it's all good,
So
don't
cool.
worry, you know, and you were like, oh, this is good, you know, I'll take this
It's
good.
such a relief from my hard-nosed Methodist mum and dad
Yeah.
driving me into this place of like craziness, right? Yeah, so you can see you went from one extreme to another extreme, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole time there was no alignment, and this is, see, the average person on earth goes, what do I believe? Well, I'm going to believe something that supports me, not believe what is true. I'm going to believe something that supports me, like my comfort levels. And this made you more comfortable than that. Yeah? And so naturally felt attracted to it. This is why a lot of people are attracted to New Age teachings. Yeah? Okay, what happened after that?
But then I found divine truth.
Okay, what are you
I was
going to...
still in that community.
Yeah, and what happened then? In terms of this here,
About God.
So now you sort of reverted back.
Yeah. I liked, like, I didn't have a lot of
Truthful.
resistance to divine truth when I was in the New Age stuff, because a lot of stuff with the New Age stuff had become annoying to me and just thought it was illogical, so it was a
And
big
also
relief
because it's
to-
been happening in your childhood.
Yeah.
See, if you had been brought up that in your childhood, you would have found it very hard to give up.
Makes sense.
But this you were brought up in your childhood to believe, naturally very difficult to address. Yes? Because these feelings came to you before there was a formulation of your logical mind.
Yep.
So naturally it's going to be much harder to give them up. In fact, when you hear divine truth, there's a tendency now to revert back to them.
I think that's what I've done. Yeah.
Right, in terms of the definitions of God and the definitions of your soul and the definitions of right and wrong and all that, there's a tendency to now go back to the childhood and start to believe maybe they were right. Almost.
And actually, you've had familial spirits around you who are like, yeah, Courtney, get into this divine truth thing. Yeah, that's good, because they can feel in you still have all the old Methodist beliefs.
Yeah.
And now you're like opening
Emotional.
yourself up to God, and they're like, this is good, we're going to get her back into this Methodist sort of belief system.
Pressure.
Pressure, women pressure on you a lot,
Yeah.
from the spirit world. It's going, but they don't want you to actually have a breakthrough with God or with, you know, love of self and all of these things, because then they won't be able to control you, but they quite like that you've still got all these Methodist injuries because it's easy to control you then.
Yeah. And because the Methodist injuries happened when you were a child, you're going to have a lot more intense emotions associated with them than what you would have imbibing a belief when you're an adult.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, they know that they've just got to trigger you in different ways and you'll want to avoid those feelings. Yeah? And so this is a way of sort of manipulating you into a place of torment. Does that make sense? Where they just remind you of different things from your childhood and you feel tormented by them, but you're not let feeling them. And so now they've got it, now they can manipulate your behaviour by tormenting you here and rewarding you there, which ironically
Well, that's what they're manipulating.
is one of the beliefs you imbibed as a child. Yeah.
So they're like, yes, Courtney, pray to God, feel nice feelings about God sometimes. That'll keep you connected to this whole childhood belief system that don't really break through those belief systems as they
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, that feels quite intense because they are quite harsh spirits. And so naturally, you're going to have headaches at times where you can't cry, but you've got this pressure, and they're trying to influence your mind. There's all these thought packets. The way it happens is there's thought packets that as soon as they have a thought towards you, that thought packet presents just above your mind in your spirit body. And you have the ability to either accept or reject it. But in the state where you've imbibed these beliefs, you're going to have a very strong tendency to accept their projection. Right? And until you deal with that emotion, that will remain. That desire will remain. Now imagine if we rubbed out that and changed that to Hindus. And we rubbed out that belief, because the Hindu beliefs are not the same. And then we rubbed out that and we called this divine truth. Can you see there's going to be troubles there, isn't there? Because the Hindu beliefs, if I've brought up from childhood that this, that, with regard to no specific God, we're all potentially God, we're all heading towards enlightenment. And so you hear Jesus talk about, becoming one with God, and you think, that just means enlightenment. And it's the same process. It's not, but that's what you believe. Because the childhood beliefs are some of the most difficult ones to give up because they all have an emotional signature that unless you go through the emotion, you will not give it up no matter how much intellectual thought you throw at it. You will not give it up. So an example of that, let's say I'm a man and I've been brought up a Christian. What's the Christian belief about men and women?
Men dominate.
Superior.
Right? So men dominate, but how? Men are... Women are, what does it say? What does the Bible say? Women are in subjection. To their husbands. So I get married. And I find divine truth, but I get married. Right? I find divine truth and I realise, that's wrong. But what's the emotion from my childhood saying? I marry Mary. In my heart, she's in subjection to me. You follow? So I'm going to treat her like I own her. That I own her will. And I'm going to do all this without thinking that I'm even doing it. Right?
And if I was raised a Christian, I'm going to agree with
Mary's going to accept it. She's going to accept that that's all good. Right? And so when I've got a problem with my wife, what will I say to myself? It's because she's not in subjection to me. She's the one who needs to make the changes. I don't need to make the changes, I'm good. She needs to make them. Let's say I'm brought up in a household that also says that women's role is to nurture. Right? So now I'm going, Mary, you're not looking after me, And it may even be right down to, what does the Proverbs say? Proverbs 30 and 31. What do they say about a woman would do? Can you remember that? Any of you being Christians?
A lot.
Well, yeah, there's this
How
long
can you do
list
everything?
of all these things that a woman should do if she's the perfect woman. Right? And I've been brought up with this since childhood. What am I going to do? What are you doing, Mary? You're not.
Here's a checklist.
Here's the checklist, and you're not doing it. You know, fix itself up. You're not doing things God's way, is what I'll end up saying. Even though it's not God's way, is it? It's this whole concept of the perfect woman that comes from my upbringing. You understand? And this is the trouble, is that whenever these beliefs are going to be confronted in you, what's going to happen is this. You're going to first go, maybe, I need to look at it. If you get beyond that, you'll go, oh, it's interesting. And when you get beyond that, you go, oh, there's something wrong here. When you get beyond that, you go, I'm bloody mad about all these false things I was taught that now are in me emotionally, and I'm going to have to undo them. So if you think about Henri, our discussion with him, you can understand why he's mad, and then you can also understand why he's distressed, because he was here on earth 200 years ago. After he passed, he continued his missionary life, trying to help other people on earth become Christian. He did that not only for his whole life on earth, the majority since he was 19 years of age when he had his enlightened moment, which was really great grandpa giving him some feelings. Since then, he's been doing it since then, after he died, and for another 100 and whatever years, because I think he died in his 60s or something like that. 140 years he's been doing it. What? And imagine you get to the end of that and you hear, none of it was true. You'd be pretty angry, wouldn't you? Like, you can understand why you'd be that angry, wouldn't you? Given that. And then, because you've been taught that what you were taught was from God, you'd be very tempted to blame the wrong people. Yeah. Very tempted to blame God rather than actually blame the people who actually did all that to you. And unfortunately, when it's something like a teaching, like a Christian teaching or a Hindu teaching or whatever, when it's something like a teaching, it's not just one person who's taught you. It's not like you can fix your mind on, Joe blow down the road, bumped me in the nose, hurt me by punching me in the nose. It's like, how many thousands of people were involved in getting to your stage of life where you were taught this teaching, and your mum and dad were taught this teaching, and all of your society was taught this teaching, and all of your history was about this teaching. There's like so many people involved, you're going to have a tendency to say, I'm not going to blame any of them, and instead what I'm going to do is blame God, because it's easier to focus my rage on somebody. And if not God, then myself, for being so stupid as to accept it. Right? And the trouble with both of those things is you're not to blame and neither is God. So when you're assigning blame towards people who are not to blame, now you're going to get right off track with processing the emotion. Right? You need to just let yourself go through the emotion of how bad it was, that on earth there are so many false beliefs, and these false beliefs are guiding lives for centuries. Centuries of people's lives. And I'm talking about whole generations. Almost, what's the percentage here of Christians in America? Do you know the latest census?
70%.
70% or something, isn't it? It's way up there, isn't it? Imagine if I went to, say, Saudi Arabia and said, what's the percentage of Muslims? Can you see it'd probably be pretty high too, wouldn't it? Like 80, 90%. And they've been brought up, we go to India. What's the percentage of Hindus? A large percentage, right, have been brought up with these beliefs. And even if they no longer think they're connected to them anymore, they're in them emotionally, right? And the trouble with these false beliefs is they just go on in your life and on in your life. You make decision after decision, and then when you pass, you'll continue, unfortunately, to make decisions. And that's why these false beliefs are so bad. So this whole concept that people have is, it doesn't matter what you believe. Can you see? It matters, because at the end of the day, it's going to guide a lot of your life. If you believe something that's true, it'll guide your life positively. But if you believe something that's false, it's going to have a serious impact negatively on your future life. It matters what you believe. It's not just like, oh, well, you can believe that and I can believe this. No, it's like the feeling I have is like, no, it matters what you believe for your own happiness' sake. If it's the truth, it'll help you become happier, right, in the long run. So for yourself, Courtney, you can see that there's decisions that were made to avoid one set of grief about the Christian faith, yes? And then, so you went from the Christian faith, which is a set of beliefs that you felt, by the time you ended your childhood, you felt like, it's really been bad for me. And then you went and accepted a new set of false beliefs.
Really based on avoiding the pain of the
Avoiding the pain of the first set of false beliefs. And of course, in the end, there would have been a new set of pain associated with that set of false beliefs. So what happens here? You might have allowed yourself to be overcloaked by a spirit eventually, having a special spirit experience. That would have ruined the rest of your life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I knew people who have that.
yeah, there's plenty that do. And so you can see, I've avoided the pain of this belief, taken on a new belief to avoid the pain of that belief, but I haven't made sure that this new belief is true.
Yep.
All right? And in imbibing a belief that I don't know whether it's true or not, I am now exposing myself to further pain and suffering because I don't know whether that belief's true either. Right? This one didn't feel true because of all the emotional things that happened in my childhood, but this one now feels better because it feels the opposite of this one. But we still don't know whether it's true or not. Right? And you can see, on earth, the average person goes from belief to belief. Sometimes they'll spend a whole life in one belief, like Andre did. You know, the spirit we just helped. He spent his entire life on earth in one belief. You imagine you've dedicated your entire life on earth to one belief, and then 200 years later, you find it's false. That's tough. You can understand why he wants to go away and have some cries, can't you? Because that's tough. Then having to come to terms with the fact that a lot of your life has been dictated to by that one set of beliefs. He believed his own, he accepted that his own great-grandfather was God, told him what to do. And then, like, the reason why I brought his great-grandfather to him was because I wanted him to see that it wasn't God, and that his great-grandpa had some issues, right, in terms of what he needed to address as well. And also he needed to face the reality. God does not tell you what to do. It's a reality. God does not do that.
So for those of us with whatever our childhood beliefs are, the Christian or the Hindu,
Yeah.
now we know divine truth.
Yep.
You were saying that we and spirits, if I got it right, that they can...
Well, you say you know divine truth, but
Well, we've heard it.
you've learnt it the same way you learnt New Age
Yeah.
at this stage.
Right.
So there's no emotional transition that's occurred at this point. To have an emotional transition, you have to let go of these beliefs emotionally.
Yeah, so my question was, how do we let go of the childhood beliefs without thinking that we're understanding divine truth, right? You know what I mean? It feels like you can get yourself into
By feeling the pain of those beliefs.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of times, beliefs cause the most pain. Understand? Because they have beliefs about yourself, beliefs about God, beliefs about, you know, who you are, what you should do with your life. These are beliefs that cause the most pain because they have the most impact on your future. Yeah. So what I'm going to have to do is to actually accept divine truth. I can't do it the same way I accepted New Age teachings. I'm going to have to remove from my heart, which is, remember he said, it felt different to my heart. It felt like when I felt God's truth about what this issue is. It feels in my heart, like not my head, but my heart, something's going on in my heart, confronting to my heart. And that's why he started getting very distressed. When you actually work your way through these childhood beliefs which cause you to believe what you believe, and you actually work your way through them, it's going to hurt because they're false. It's going to hurt. And the average person doesn't want it to hurt, so what they want to do instead is just replace it intellectually with another set of beliefs that sound more true. Right? But this isn't going to be in your heart, even if you've heard it, until this is out of it. Because the two teachings are completely oppositional emotionally.
So we can think that we have accepted divine truth, but really it's just the feelings from the childhood.
You haven't accepted divine truth. The average person on earth is not going to until they get rid of their childhood beliefs, which are all mattering. They've all got an emotional signature inside of the person. And while that emotional signature exists, it's impossible to overcome it. The only way you can do is experience the belief, the falsity of the belief, emotionally. Just like our friend Henri had to do. He had to go through the experience of, wow, how bad is this? And you can feel in him there's a lot of grief in him about having to do that, but he has to do it. And when he does, we can have another conversation and he'll be able to accept some truths. Because he will have felt and released from himself some of the beliefs that he imbibed through the process. Yeah?
It's like you've been saying all weekend, isn't it? The false belief is always going to colour the way you view everything else. So
yeah.
Holding on to, say, the belief from your childhood that God is punishing and intolerant of mistakes,
yeah.
When you hear divine truth, then if you've got that still in your heart as that's what a loving God does, then you're going to sort of hear what we teach, but ascribe to it the feelings that you're holding on to inside.
Yeah. So what, without knowing it, what we're doing internally is we're distorting the new teachings through the emotional experience of our old teachings. And that's what so when we're talking about it with somebody else, we're distorting the new teachings with the emotional feelings of our old teachings. We're doing the same thing. And if some of you are Hindu, and some of you are Buddhist, and some of you are Muslim, and some of you are Christian, you'll distort it in different ways based on the teachings of your old teachings. Yep.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Just sort of building on that. And
Just
really,
closer.
I can relate to almost everything that Courtney said.
Yep.
So yesterday, I think you said 20% of our beliefs are from childhood, are false beliefs.
No, I didn't say that. I said 20% of our sins.
Our sins.
Which is not the same.
No. So we.
You see, you think of what Courtney did with Christian beliefs.
Yeah.
Her primary sin is to not release them.
Yeah.
So she chose that. So she imbibed a whole heap of beliefs from her childhood, which she had no choice over really accepting.
Yeah.
But then she chose to not release them emotionally. In other words, not go through the emotional trauma of feeling the results of those teachings. She made that choice. Of course, she didn't know that she should do that, but also there's a feeling inside that says, it was so painful, I don't want to visit that. So you do sort of know, you know what I mean? You do know you're doing this. But it's sort of like, it's very uncomfortable to have to do that. And look at what's going to happen with my family if I do that. And they're going to get upset with me if I do that properly. When you release these beliefs emotionally, your family is going to know and they're going to go ballistic. Right? Because their feeling is that you should keep them emotionally. Right? And so when you do that, you're sort of going, oh, there's a better way. The better way is I just suppress all those emotions, yes? And what I do instead is train myself intellectually to accept another teaching that helps me get over those emotions. Not through them, but over them.
And that's a sin.
And that's a sin. There's the beginning of our sin. The desire to, and that's a huge sin because you're sinning against your own soul doing that. It's like, it's going to have some pretty bad consequences. You're going to make decisions and choices thinking that you're doing it with these teachings, but actually doing it with these teachings. Right? The feelings will be these teachings, and the thoughts will be these teachings.
Okay.
And the two are going to be sometimes look similar, and so the feeling is going to be the same feeling as you have with these teachings. And then where it looks differently, well, there's no feeling at all because I don't know what to feel about that, right? So there's no feeling at all about that. So there's no motivation because there's nothing, the feelings motivate you. So there's no motivation to change, you know? So unless this is dealt with, this was the childhood, the Christian belief we were talking about the point is the childhood. When did you make this decision, Courtney? New age?
Like 18.
18, so teenager. Right? This is when most people make some changes during their teenage life. And when did you start hearing divine truth? What was your age then?
I guess it would have been 24.
24. Right. So more like now an adult. Classified by most of us are 2-year-old, 24-year-olds, but that's the way it goes. Yep. So because we're not developed emotionally yet, because we've got all these hard emotions from our childhood to experience. So here we are. We've had this experience now. This one is going to be the most impactful because this one is the one that happened in my formative years, right? And for a long time after that, actually, here. So that this one is going to be the most emotionally impactful. And then if I choose to ignore it emotionally as an adult, and choose to not experience it as an adult, then of course, any new belief I have will be a knee-jerk reaction to avoiding the old belief, if I ever have a new belief. And when I hear divine truth for the first time, I'm going to look at it through the filters of all of my old beliefs that are all childhood formed emotions that happened before I had a developed intellect. Can you see? Unless I feel them, you can try to use your mind to get rid of them, and they're not going to go. You're going to have to feel them for them to go. That's the only way they will go.
Like, is it possible to do that in layers? Because I feel like I am chipping away at the job. So I thought I was done with the job and stuff.
No, nobody here is done with the job.
No, I'm not. No.
I'm not done with the job itself.
No, I thought, anyway, so I've been kind of chipping away at it, sort of realizing that, I guess it's more there than I thought.
Well, the average person wants to believe they're done with the childhood stuff.
Oh, I mean,
Does that make sense? So
yeah.
we have a motivation to feel, I'm over that now.
Yeah.
I've dealt with that now. You know, that happened when I was a kid. I'm now 50 or 40 or 30. It's a long time ago. It doesn't really affect my life.
Yeah.
And this is all total crap. Because it does affect your life because the emotional signature remains until you go through it. And it will define what you can even accept as a belief in the future. It will define what you will do with your life in the future. It will define every relationship, every friendship, every choice for work, every way that you interact with the world around you, including with the environment. Everything will be defined by the beliefs imbibed then. And your unwillingness to deal with it is what's going to cause most of your sin. You're going to have these knee-jerk reactions, you're going to respond to them, you're going to act in your unloving behaviours and everything because you've avoided it, because you're trying to get away from it. Right? So that's what I mean by 20% of your sin is what happened in your childhood or what other people did to you, and then what you do in the avoidance of what they did to you ends up sometimes being more like 90 or 5% of all the things that happen. Because we can choose in the place of avoiding our feelings. We can choose to do some very, very damaging things, right? Not even understanding a lot of times how damaging while we're doing them. And you can see why, because it's the childhood experience that's still in me emotionally, right? And God wants to help you remove it, but to remove it, you're going to have to acknowledge your sin as an adult. Then He can help you remove it, right? But if you're not going to acknowledge your sin as an adult, then there's no pathway back to even your own experience of the childhood experience. There's no way there. So it's just going to stay there. And so if you're not careful, you'll end up like Andre, who's 200 and something years old and still having it. And that was something from when he was 19. We haven't even talked about the stuff that happened earlier, right?
The beliefs that made him open to that experience. Yeah.
Same age as you, going in the new age. He took it, and the reason why it was such an impactful experience for him is because the spirit, his great-great-grandpa appeared to him, sort of thing. Not that he could see him, but there was this huge emotional onrush of feelings that accompanied the acknowledgement of what he believed was the truth from God, and his willingness to believe it was from God, which was, by the way, caused by a lot of his own personal arrogance and need to be special, and which he hasn't even looked at, of course, yet, because he's still going through the process of facing up to the problem in the first place, right? And all of that happened in his childhood, all this build-up of arrogance and build-up of belief systems that allowed the event to occur. That all need to be addressed. And one reason why he wanted to blame God and get away from the conversation is because at the end of the day, it's pretty hard going to those emotions. It's better to blame God for them instead. Similar to what I was saying. What was your name again?
Dawson.
Dawson, that's right. Similar to what I was saying to Dawson about his own experience, right? And this is the trouble, is that if we're not careful, we'll blame the wrong thing for our problems, when actually the real problems began many, many years ago. Usually during our childhood or our teenage years, we make choices and decisions that formulate opinions, and then as an adult, we're acting in them constantly, acting every single time in harmony with the sin that already exists. Yeah? I'm busting to do a wee. What's the time? Must be pretty late. Yeah, 4:22. We have to finish. Yeah. Does that feel disappointing?
It's just getting good, wasn't it?
Just getting good. Just getting warmed up. And
this is why we usually have 3 days.
yeah. Can I just say though, can you see why I chose this subject?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. The subject beliefs matter.
Yep.
Because they have such an impactful amount of control over the future direction of your life. They determine your faith. They determine what you think is true. They determine what you think love is. They determine what you think, like, being truthful is. They determine your course of life, your actions you take in your future life. They determine everything. And if you think that your beliefs are like really innocent, things that don't really matter, how strong they are, well, you're just deluding yourself completely. They matter so much that many of you, if you pass with the current beliefs you have that are emotionally established, you'll find it will take you hundreds of years to get rid of them. And that's why it's so important to deal with them now. So face some truths now. Because if you face them now, you won't have to face them later. It's economical to face them now rather than facing them later. So don't just accept a statement of anybody's, including mine. You know, make sure that you've investigated the reality of it before you accept it. But be humble enough to go, well, I haven't yet worked it out as well. Don't go, oh, this is all wonderful, I accept all this, isn't it amazing? And then go off preaching it to others until your own heart has been sorted with regard to whether it's real or not. Yeah? Because all you do then is you do what Andre did. You've been influenced by somebody, guy claiming to be Jesus, to telling you some truths, what he thinks are true, what you, if you look at it from that perspective, of course that's not the way I feel it, but because I've had 2,000 years of experience of finding truth using this method, by the way every single truth that I've ever discovered has been done the same way as what I'm recommending you, and that is be like a child, realise you don't know much compared to God, realise that there's a whole universe out there that's wonderful that you can discover things about, and you need to learn to be open and honest with yourself, and then also deal with your feelings about it. That's something you need to do. But you also need to establish things as truth over a period of time that is done through a process that's going to be emotional. You're going to have to let go of old ideas, and then you're going to have to be, then you've got the capacity to, with a new idea, to assess it more accurately. At the moment, if we don't do that, we'll end up with this filters going on all the time, filtering through our old experience. The one that we didn't have control over, ironically. The childhood experience which somebody else had control over, not you, right? And that'll be the thing you filter everything through. So it's far better to get rid of that experience by emotionally working your way through that experience so that you now are like a blank slate. Or you could say like a child, able to question and consider, not be bossy and not think you already know, and not think you already get it, and not think with your mind, isn't it great how good you are because you understand these things. None of that. That's all just arrogance, right? Using divine truth for arrogance. Forget all that and just focus on, I need to become this humble child who's capable of seeing that my beliefs matter, so I better make sure of them before I believe them and act upon them. You follow? Make sure of them first. Don't just accept and then off you go on your merry way without making sure of them.
Yeah, but it's also about understanding what beliefs you already have inside of you, isn't it?
Correct.
Like
Yeah.
being really honest about what's emotionally my emotional beliefs, not what I think that I want to believe.
Yeah.
But what's residing inside of me that's going to preclude me being childlike in my discovery.
Yeah. And particularly the beliefs I have about principles, love, truth, emotion, God, the universe, the human soul. They're the ones that are going to matter in the end, because they're going to dictate to you your entire future life, one way or the other, whatever those beliefs are. Yeah. And it's no good going in the spirit realm, going and 200 years down the track and going, oh boy, I just accepted and acted upon that thing without looking at it. And 200 years down the track, I go, oh, it's terrible, right, that I've done that. It's far better if you go tomorrow, you can go, oh, I've worked through that thing enough to know that that's actually an untruth from a love perspective, and therefore I can discard it. And the way I do it myself is I measure everything based on love. Like, is that a loving belief? Is reincarnation a loving belief? No. Like, you come back to this earth, which is hard enough the first time, right? And to work through issues that you don't know you have because you had your life review in another place and you can't remember it. Does that sound loving to you? Doesn't it sound very unfair? Well, if it sounds unfair, it probably is. and therefore not something that God would create, right? So let yourself work through that. Now, it's not unfair that you have to feel your own emotions, because they're yours. Nobody else can feel them for you. Only you can feel them. They're in you now. There's nothing else that can be done but to feel them. Get rid of them. Don't carry them around. It's unloving for you to carry them around. It's unloving for you to suppress them and deny them and use food or drink or alcohol or whatever it is that you can, entertainment, spirit, possession, whatever, to avoid them, because they're yours and only you can have them. So have them. And just be aware that they're going to expand you to the point where you're capable of anything. The way God designed you to be. Capable of anything. Right? The pinnacle of His beautiful creations. Capable of anything. That's what God designed you to be. You're not going to be that if you can't handle your own emotions. You understand that? If you can't handle your own emotions, you don't know. And when I say handle, I don't mean control them. I mean have them and experience them and deal with them without wanting to kill yourself. Right? Be able to have them no matter what they are. When you get to the stage where you're able to have them no matter what they are, you will feel very confident that you can handle anything in your future. And that gives you a deep sense of reassurance, right? That you are the pinnacle of God's creation and that He made you this person who's able to handle your life, your choices, your decisions. So that's what we'd like to leave you with, I think, for the week. Yeah? A lot of you will be seeing next week or the week after, right? So we look forward to seeing you there. And we'll expand maybe a bit further on some of these principles in those discussions. Yeah? Please. Yeah?
Do you need help with teardown or anything like that?
Yeah, I'll give you a few instructions next week.
Yeah, let's do that in a minute. But yeah, so Mary and I just want to say it's been great to see you and have you here. And it's been great that you've let me, at least part of the time, have a discussion about this subject, belief matters. Of course, it's a subject that I'd like to expand upon a lot more because we've barely touched the beliefs in God. You know, there's a multitude of beliefs in God. And then I would like to talk about beliefs about the human soul, beliefs about the spirit world, beliefs about the laws, all beliefs, and just make some sort of real straight statements so that people who are hearing God's truth in the future go, so he's saying that's wrong, he's saying that's right, he's saying that's wrong, he's saying that's right. And it just can cause people to pause for a moment, just like our spirit friends did, and go, uh-oh, what have I been thinking? And it also begins a point of discussion where people are more open to discussion about these matters. So that's what we'll probably do for some time in the future. I don't know when that will be. Maybe it might be a part of our next tour, where we're on that first day where we, instead of doing Secrets of the Universe, we do these beliefs are false. And see how everyone who comes deals with that. And like I said yesterday, the beauty of saying what's false is that at least it gives people time to pause and think and go, what if it is false? And then it gives them a chance to look at the truth of things. Yeah. All right, well...
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you guys, and especially the ones who we won't see in the next following 2 weekends.
Yeah, so good luck with things.
We wish you really well in the year ahead.
Yeah.
We'll hopefully see you next year, but no pressure. No guarantees, is there?
No.
But yeah, we wish you really well with everything that has presented largely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all we need to say. Just some housekeeping, but we'll finish and then I'll say.
Yeah. So we're done for the day. And in terms of tidying up, we don't need you to pack up any chairs or anything. They've said that they will do all that.
Can I just ask the people who are seated near the speakers, if you could just stack 3 high away from the speakers? speakers because we just need to get access in there, so, yeah. You just stack them away.
Now, there's not much you can do to help us pack up because we're good at this. we know what to do. We've done it a few times and we can do it in about half an hour or less. We will need some, perhaps, help of a few people just carrying some things out later.
In about 20 minutes.
But it will take a half an hour or more. And we're not going to be able to talk to you after the event because we have to pack up by 6 p.m. So, and they've asked us to be out by then. So that means we've got to get the job done and get out the door, basically. So if we haven't had a chance to talk to you personally, well, sorry about that, but we can't talk to everybody. And you know that as well as we. And the bigger the groups get, of course, the more that's the case. And that's why we encourage you when you're in the group to say and ask the questions or whatever while you're here. Aside from that, we'll see the people we'll see next week at a different venue. Those of you, just to remind you, it's not at this venue, it's another venue. Hopefully a nicer.
Sorry.
Hopefully a nicer venue.
Yeah.
Well, when I say nicer, more intimate venue.
There are still a few places available in each of the next 2 weekends, so if anyone wants to register.
Yeah. We'd like to thank you for your donations, and we'd also like to remind you to thank those people who participated in helping us as well. So the people who welcomed you each morning, those people who've done those things for us. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
So we may see you in a year's time.
Yeah.
Depending on whether you want to.
Yeah, up to you.
Thank you.
Because you guys are-